Aliens Explored is a podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a sceptical perspective whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it?
Whitley Strieber is an American writer best known for his horror novels The Orphan and The Hunger, and for Communion, a non-fiction account of his alleged experiences with non-human entities. Strieber claims that he was abducted from his cabin in upstate New York on the evening of December 26, 1985 by non-human beings. He wrote about this experience and related experiences in the book Communion in 1987. Although the book is perceived generally as an account of alien abduction, Strieber draws no conclusions about the entity of the alleged abductors. He refers to the beings as the visitors, a name chosen to be as neutral as possible to entertain the possibility that they are not extraterrestrials.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Aliens Explored. I am one of your hosts, Stu Jackson.
And I'm Neil Kelly.
And this week, we are discussing Whitley Strieber. I think I mispronounced his name last week. I called him Strieber.
Oh no, I don't know how he pronounced it. I mean, I even watched the film that was based on his experiences, and his surname just never came up.
It did once. That's how I know to correct myself. Yeah, because I've rewatched it myself.
Right. Because
at one point, Strieber is mentioned.
But based on that spelling, I'd call him Strieber. But I know that is he Jewish?
No, he's a Catholic. Very
Catholic.
Catholic.
I just know that it's an American thing, and very much an American Jewish thing, because a lot of them have German names to change the pronunciation. It's a sort of Anglicisation. That German. I'm getting a bit nerdish now. German is a very regular language. That if something is spelt a certain way, it's always pronounced that way. It's not like English. Think how many ways there are of pronouncing O-U-G-H, depending on what comes before and after it. Bow, through, thought, tough, But with German, in German, E-I is always pronounced I, and I-E is always pronounced E. Those diphthongs never vary. But it seems to be an American thing. I mean, it's the big joke in Young Frankenstein with Gene Wilder as Dr. Frankenstein. They say, Dr. Frankenstein, and he says, it's Dr. Frankenstein! Because he's an American. Yes. And, it's like the English Jewish manager of the Beatles was Brian Epstein. The American playboy paedophile who entertained Prince Andrew with some sex-trafficked women, was Jeffrey Epstein. Harvey Weinstein went both ways.
Yes, we hear stories about Harvey Weinstein. Anyway, bringing it.
So we'll call him Walter Whitley Strieber. Is that what we're calling him?
Strieber is what he was in the thing, but but it sounds like I wasn't completely incorrect when I called him.
Right, I must have missed it.
So that's a bit reassuring.
I was actually, it was probably a little while into the film. I thought, I haven't heard his last name, and it must have just washed over me. And I thought, I'll listen out for it, and it never came up. No one said.
I was consciously listening for it just in case I'd got it wrong. And
he's seeing all these doctors and the psychiatrists, and no one's saying, Mr. Strieber or Mr. Strieber. So.
Yeah.
So let's.
Well, that's exactly what happens. Yes, with the doctor. But we're getting a little bit of ahead of ourselves there. So, so he's a playwright, a screenwriter, an author. Wrote some really quite high-profile stuff prior to his experiences. And yeah, he wrote a book called Communion, which was made into the movie, and that's what we're referencing now. I think we both did the same thing. Now, I'm going to hold my hands up. I've never read the book. I have only watched the movie.
I've only watched the movie recently.
Very recently. So I rewatched it. Now, I can tell you a little story about myself. When I was in my early 20s, so it was not too long after it came. In fact, probably even before then, when I was in my late teens, maybe sort of 17, 18 years old, I watched the movie for the first time. It utterly freaked me out, completely, like irrationally. Gave me huge, massive nightmares, freaked me out. And I'd bought it on DVD. I then, every single night, felt compelled to watch it, even though it freaked me out every time and gave me horrendous nightmares, to the point I had to destroy the video back in the days of VHS, before DVDs. But yeah, I had to destroy it because I became obsessed and compulsed to re-watch it over and over again. That then led me to question myself, my own experiences, and that's a whole other topic perhaps for another day. But it was it's something I look back on as a kind of an awakening in self-knowledge. But yeah, I became really obsessed with the movie, even though it utterly free. And now I'm expecting. I haven't watched it since, so for me that's like nearly 30 years,
right,
since I watched it. And I was expecting. Oh, do you know what? Yeah, I'm going to expect the special effects are not up by today's standards. I specifically watched it daytime, so there's lots of light. I had the curtains wide open. I'm sat in the study watching it on my computer, and yeah, I freaked out just as much as I did 30 years ago.
What was it particularly that freaked you out about it?
It was the first, I'll say the first two abduction scenes. The rest of it is really easy. Even when there's jump scares in it, those didn't affect me at all. But it's those specific abduction scenes, which I can even say now by today's standards, they look cheesy. They don't look all that. But maybe it's the soundtrack or something like that. I mean, the soundtrack's awesome.
I mean, as you say, the special effects are ropey. That's the thing with special effects. That's what stops a film from aging well. If you've got 1980s, the film was made in 89. So it's looking like he's being abducted by Ewoks or refugees from the Muppet Show, to me. it didn't look at all. What the hell is going on? And then a
Blue
final
Munchkins.
Yeah, and at the end when he's kind of dancing with them, I think what's going on? I mean, it struck me that Whitley Strieber was a guy who was in the industry. He was a writer of horror and fantasy fiction. That was his living, and he did very well in it. That's why he lived in this huge New York apartment. He had this luxurious cabin upstate in the woods, which is where the incidents happened. He began his career with the novels of The Wolfen, published in 1978, and The Hunger, 1981, both made into very successful movies. What really struck me was that these incidents that happened. I mean, the first one was on Boxing Day 1985. That was the first of several incidents. What do you think? He went through this, and then he wrote a book, and then it was optioned and made into a Hollywood movie with an A-list star with Christopher Walken playing Whitley Strieber, all in the space of 3 years. From the first experience to that movie with a Hollywood A-lister in it, that in 3 years. So this guy was connected, he was in the industry, and I'm guessing that this movie Communion was made on the back of the fact that this guy was a known entity in Hollywood. His writing had been successful before, so there's more.
You'll get no argument from me in that case.
Yeah, that if he'd have been a complete outsider, someone who just said, "Well, this happened to me, and I've written a book," they said, "Well, who the hell are you?" That would be the Hollywood response.
It'd have been dismissed.
Yeah,
utterly. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
okay, I thought you were going somewhere with that.
what I'm saying is that it just shows, this guy is in this world of fantasy, horror, and I know when I've been writing something, if you really get into it, it can affect your dreams. You can have dreams, and one expert did say that his the way he described the first experience is difficult. Is the phrase hypnagogia? Hypnagogic, yeah, which I understand
trance-like state.
Which I understand is a kind of sleep paralysis. The way I've had it explained to me is that when you go to sleep, your brain goes to sleep, but also your body goes to sleep, which prevents you from acting out your dreams, from punching whoever's in bed with you or murdering people. But there have been incidents, and they're apparently quite rare, where someone will wake up, or they'll imagine they've woken up, but their body hasn't. So they are actually paralysed. And through the ages, people have attributed this to demons or witches. A demon sat on their chest, they can feel the weight of it, or a witch in the room. They're seeing all these things, but they're not really awake. And I know what that's like, because I've been lying in bed, looking at the ceiling, awake, and suddenly my wife will nudge me and say, "Turn over, you're snoring." And I'll say, "But I'm awake." And she'll say, "No, you're not. I'm just dreaming. I'm asleep, dreaming that I'm lying in bed awake, staring at the ceiling," which, as dreams go, is probably one of the most tedious.
So you're theorising that he simply dreamt it?
Yes, yeah. I think that there was plenty of stimulus in that direction. He lived in a world where these kinds of things, this world of the imagination, it's not surprising that it would seep into his dreams and that he could have a particularly vivid dream. Also in the film, his son appears to have been aware of these visitors. But of course, he's a very young lad. I don't know how old he is. He's probably about 6 or 7 years old in the movie.
I think he was, about that age at the time,
So very, very suggestible. I mean, this guy tells his kids stories. He reads him bedtime stories, sometimes ones he's made up. So I'd attribute the son's belief in it to that he's had it suggested to him by his dad to such an extent that he sees it too.
Okay, I can absolutely go along with that.
For me, the really tense moment in the film was, and this is typical Americana, he decides there's someone outside, because he lives in this cabin. He's paranoid, for one thing. So he's got all this security, he's got all these light sensors, think lights will come on. If anyone comes near, the place will be lit up like Christmas. That he decides, he suddenly reaches a shotgun down off a pump action shotgun down off the top of the wardrobe, loads it, and goes running around the house where his wife and young child were asleep. He nearly shoots his wife in the I don't know how. Well, I guess that bit was written into the. I guess he wrote that bit into the where he nearly shot his wife. Well, Americans do that all the time, don't they? They shoot their wives. They shoot family members by accident.
It does happen, but I mean, I'm willing to say, there's got to be an element of dramatisation, and there is going to be with a movie of such events. Absolutely 100% with that. And one thing you hadn't mentioned, which again, if he'd imagined this or dreamt it or mistaken a dream for reality, that would also explain the hypnosis and the details that he came out with and that. What it doesn't answer for me, though, there's a few things it doesn't answer. One is that he himself desperately wanted this to be a hallucination or a dream, or he was looking for that to be the answer, and it wasn't for him. So I think if that were the case, he would have been open to the idea, and would have accepted it as an idea.
Although I think he might have vacillated a bit. I mean, at one point when he's being examined by a neurologist for a possible brain tumour or something that could have caused this, I think he was quite relieved to find that this it's not caused by something medical, because that if it was that particular medical thing, it means I'm going to die.
Well, yes, but if the explanation was simply, look, you had a bad dream, that would have been a huge relief as well, and I think he would have latched onto that as an explanation. Certainly, the way he was so vehemently trying to find a rational explanation for this.
But Strieber did have form for imagining things so vividly that he convinced themselves they were true. And there was a classic case, and he himself didn't even understand why he was doing it, but he claims that he was present at the Whitman massacre, the Texas Towers sniper at the University of Austin in Texas in 1966. Now, according to his mother, he was in Austin, but he wasn't on campus that day. And he vividly remembers things like, he remembers a child riding a bike and being shot off it, having his head blown off while riding a bike. And of course, according to the official report, that there was no child riding a bike who was shot. He has these vivid memories of gut-shot women lying there screaming in agony, and he knew that the minute he went to assist them, he would get shot too. So he just had to hide behind this wall, and he saw someone else go to assist them and get his head blown off. This was all just invented, and he knew it was invented, but he kept telling the story and didn't know why he was telling the story. So he has some form for this, but he's a creative. He imagines this. He makes his living out of inventing this stuff.
Absolutely. And there's no question the guy has a very, very vivid imagination that runs away with him. And yeah, absolutely, you nailed it in that. He has form for that. But when his wife went under hypnosis, I mean, she's the grounded one. She's the sensible. I mean, she was an author herself. But not in the same out there sense that he was. But yeah, she recalled details of an event where there was very firmly a mental block put in place, preventing her from really recalling details. That's not come from him. Where's that come from? There was also, during the making, or I think it was actually just after Communion had been released, not during the making, but Philippe Mora, who was the director, he stayed at Strieber's cabin where it allegedly happened. This was in 1987, and he himself had an experience.
Is that the one that's shown in the movie where they go to the cabin with their friends? And,
no, that's his friend Alex.
Alex, right? Alex and his partner or wife, and they're so freaked out by what happened the night before that the next day they just say, we want to go. They've arrived that evening, they've settled down for the night, something's happened outside, and the next day they said, we just want to go home. But how many American movies have you seen where people go and stay in a remote cabin, they ignore the early signs that they're being observed or they're stalked or they're being hunted, and they end up in a fight for their lives? Maybe one of them will survive. It's standard slasher fare. So you can imagine they think, well, no, if there's someone out there in the woods who's noticed us, who's testing our defences, actually let's just go home. Let's just, we're not comfortable.
Absolutely.
Nothing supernatural about it. This is an American horror. This is very, very real. This is people with guns and knives.
Yeah. Well, that's it. His friend Alex, experienced it, and that was again in 1985. But no, this was much later than that when the director stayed. So Communion's made. It's done. And then the director has an experience at that cabin.
Okay.
Now, okay, I'm not totally blind to the idea of being open to suggestion. You know, he's just spent this time intensively working on this freaky movie, and you know, but that's a hell of a coincidence.
Yeah, I mean,
hell of a coincidence.
I haven't read the book. I'll come clean because this is new to me. But I did watch Communion, and the things that struck me about it was it's very dated. I mean, it's got an A-list star playing Whitley Strieber, but I didn't recognise any of the other actors in it. They managed to get Christopher Walken in the lead role. It had that feel of a made-for-TV movie, but that could just be because of the special effects have dated. The portrayal of the visitors, I mean, there were two kinds, were there? The little blue munchkin people.
Yes. And
there were the standard greys, the tall, willowy, insect-like faces, big black eyes. Well, I mean, they were quite prominent in movies of that time, weren't they? I mean, we saw the greys in Close Encounters of the Third Kind a decade before. The little blue creatures, they look like something out of... was the third Star Wars movie out by then with the Ewoks and...
The Ewoks,
yeah.
Very
that, or Fraggle Rock things. Or something like that. I mean, maybe that's not what they look like. Maybe that's just what they mocked up for the movie. But that's what it felt like. These did not feel like threatening beings.
But both these alien types have been depicted, or not just depicted, but experienced by people independently all over the world in different abduction reports.
Well, his friend Alex...
I just got to go back on one thing you said. I doubt any of these people, any of the cast will be listening. But if you are, that's fantastic. Hope you're enjoying. Please tweet us. But it was, you say, Christopher Walken was the only... Oh no, there was a lot of A-listers in this. So Lindsay Cruz, who played his wife, was very, very well known, particularly at the time. Yeah, I think less so now, but very, very big in the 80s.
I'm doing them a disservice. Yeah, okay, I understand.
You are doing him a disservice, and we've got to put that right. Frances Sternhagen, who played the doctor who hypnotised him, she's been in loads. I mean, she's been in Star Trek, you know. And speaking of Star Trek alumni, Andreas Katsulas, who played his friend Alex, who we mentioned. Very famously played Romulan captain in Star Trek Next Generation. I can't remember which, but most famously played Jakar in the series Babylon 5.
Okay, these are that's why I haven't.
You're not the sci-fi fan that I am. It's got to be so.
Okay.
But no, I felt it was important to address it. Yeah, and of course Eric Clapton did the soundtrack.
Eric Clapton did the soundtrack, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there was a lot of big names behind this movie. They obviously thought it was going to do well.
Given that it was based on an incident that had only happened 3 years before, in between which time it had kind of played out. I mean, it had started 3 years previously. The whole series of events had played out, and then he decided to write a book about it. And then the book had been published, and then it got optioned for a movie, and then it got made all in the space of these 3 years. It's quite phenomenal. But this guy had a routine, because he wrote The Wolfen and The Howling. He was quite used to his books very quickly being made into movies, even though this one wasn't fiction. It was
well, absolutely, and I think you've hit the. You know, the guy was a mover and shaker, and he was well known, and you're absolutely right. He was connected, and that's why it was news. That's why I mean, Communion sold as a book sold incredibly.
Is it 2 million, something like that?
I've no idea of the
2
numbers,
million,
but I know it was massively popular. So yeah, they were onto the studios were onto a sure thing with the movie, really. I'm not under any illusions that they did it, for any for getting the word out there or because it was so believable or anything like that. No, absolutely. And I found the movie. I think it's useful as a general guide to Strieber's state of mind. It's just had that end scene when he goes back and he boards the craft and they're all dancing and he has the conversation. I don't think for one moment that was a representation of what happened, but more a metaphor for him coming to terms with what happened to him. And I think that's all it was, nothing more than that. A way of sort of pigeonholing the experience. There's a really nice scene where he has the conversation in the art gallery with his wife, and you've got lots of POV shots, point of view shots for the non-filmmakers out there, where you're seeing things. You're seeing his wife through Whitley's eyes, and you're seeing Whitley through her eyes, and they're having this conversation with each other about what it all means and what does God exist, and it's quite a big conversation. But yeah, of course, there's always going to be dramatic license with these films, but no, as in terms of the first experience on 26th of December, I believe something happened, and I believe it happened again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there was much artistic license, because I think Strieber wrote the screenplay. He took a bit of issue with, there was a bit of off-script ad-lib where Christopher Walken went full Walken, and that wasn't... he suddenly became Christopher Walken rather than Whitley Strieber. He didn't like that. I guess he didn't have much say as to the kind of special effects that would be used. I mean, interestingly, he was keen to point out that, or to refer to these entities as visitors.
Yes.
He never at any point suggested that they'd arrived in some kind of spacecraft. He never saw a UFO. He suggested they might perhaps be interdimensional beings. His friend Alex, who got freaked out that time at the cabin, when he spoke to him later, well, Alex was apparently of Romanian origin, and said, "Well, these beings are a part of their folk tales. They are the fairies or the hobgoblins or whatever that they will come."
Kobolds, I think he refers to him in
Kobolds,
the film. Yeah. Which when you dig deep into the mythologies and religions of pretty much every nation, actually there are parallels you can draw with the UFO phenomenon. Anyway, so yeah, I can absolutely believe it, but you're absolutely right. He put forward the interdimensional thing as basically an off the cuff. Here's a possibility. It wasn't even a theory. It was just I'm not saying the one thing or another. It's just could be anything.
And
we don't know is the key.
Yeah, and he did put that forward before scientists. I think this is back in 1989. Before scientists had really accepted the idea of moving between dimensions, but I suppose scientists had its theory of relativity, moving between dimensions as you move through time, but it wasn't generally out there as a popular idea.
Do you know, I'm going to dispute that a little bit because it was something else that Strieber wrote on was the Twilight Zone. They explored that back in the 50s. The idea of going from different through different dimensions from one to another. Star Trek had it with the mirror universe, with where they all had goatee beards, so that's how you knew they were evil. And I'm looking at Neil with his fresh goatee beard and laughing. You can't see that.
This is my lockdown beard.
Yeah, but it is just a goatee beard, so we know that Neil is his own evil twin. But yeah, so yeah, it was just purely a theory. But like I say, the guy, he wanted a rational, normal explanation. He didn't want the burden of this being something extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, he was extensively tested for temporal lobe epilepsy and other brain abnormalities at his own request, but his brain was found to be functioning normally. I would say that would come as a relief. If I thought I've been having these experiences, it could be because I'm suffering from temporal lobe epilepsy or I'm brain damaged. I imagine I would rather have it mysterious than be the mystery solved, but traced to a source like that, some serious debilitating illness that's going to kill me after a long illness. It also said Whitley Strieber has repeatedly expressed frustration that his experiences have been taken as alien contact when he does not exactly know what they were. Strieber has reported anomalous childhood experiences and suggested that he may have suffered some sort of early interference by intelligence or military agencies. So now we're getting into conspiracy theory territory.
You are, and that is much more on the speculation side of things. I'm going to counter something you said a moment ago, though, about the relief of finding out that it wasn't this frontal lobe epilepsy.
Frontal lobe epilepsy, temporal lobe epilepsy.
Temporal lobe epilepsy. And I agree, it would have been a relief. Now, some years ago, I started feeling ill all the time. This was over a period of some months. I was tired all the time. I was gaining weight very rapidly. I had no energy. I had no motivation to do anything. My emotional state was sort of quite up and down. And I went to the doctor and I talked about it. And because of my family history, one of the key things I identified was, you've possibly got diabetes. Fair enough, I'm overweight, I'm of that age, my father's got diabetes. I recognise the possibility, I recognise the potential. And I was diagnosed for it, and the result came back negative. And yes, there was an element of relief, but also there was significantly an element of frustration, because that means I don't have an answer to what's going wrong. And in fact, it took several years, and if you're listening to this, dear listener, and you want to know, I suffer from a condition called hypothyroidism, which took me several years to be diagnosed. And in fact, all throughout these tests, so this is quite personal, all throughout those years and years of testing and trying to get to the bottom of what it was frustrating. I wanted it to be diabetes, because I know people with diabetes, and I know
I have diabetes.
Treatable. You have diabetes, although I didn't know you back then. But it's a condition you can live with, and you can treat it. And hey, if I knew what it was and got the treatment, fantastic. I can go back to living a normal life. And it was so coming back without these I was tested for a number of different conditions, and every time it came back, no, you haven't got it, no, you haven't got it, and I was getting increasingly, I wanted it to be one of these things.
Yeah, diabetes is a different thing, because I remember when I was diagnosed, I'd probably for about a year or even longer, I'd had those same kind of symptoms of feeling very lethargic. I was always forgetting things. I'd suddenly remember something that I was supposed to have done, and eventually dig out whatever it was. But yeah, this experience of almost living in another world, where suddenly something would it would come to you in a dream suddenly, that you oh shit, we were going to do this, and I'd completely forgotten. And this tiredness, this getting exhausted. I had a horrible job at the time, which ground me down. I was commuting 3 hours every day. But when I was diagnosed as diabetes, the reason I went for a diagnosis was that there were just lots of posters about at the time saying always tired, always always going to the, always thirsty, always going to the toilet a lot. And I had noticed that because I was now working in a job which I liked, but they had very tight control over us, and we had a door pass. So they knew every time we left the office, because we had to click in and click out. I kept going to the toilet. Now, we just moved to these offices, and my job did involve a lot of drinking. I was working in journalism. I was being entertained by PR people a lot. The drinks would flow, and you'd be going to the toilet. And these offices were the air conditioning or the central heating. It was a very parched environment, so you're always drinking lots of water and then going to the toilet. But I was losing weight at a tremendous rate. I lost a couple of kilos. I think I lost a stone in weight in the end. I could see my ribs. So yeah, there were all these posters of her. So I went for the test, and it came back positive. You are diabetic. But I was amazed how quickly, once treatment started, boom, you're back. Suddenly, it felt like I was 10 years younger. So yeah, that is a good thing to find out. There's something wrong with you, and actually, it's something which left untreated would have killed you. Would have killed me.
Yeah.
So I found this thing. It's being treated. That was 20 years ago. Haven't really suffered much from it in those times. But obviously, I had to get used to a medication, quite a strict medication and testing routine. But to suddenly find out you got something like temporal lobe epilepsy or a brain tumor or something, that's not something you can just treat. You can,
No, but I still stand by my point that it's better to know what a thing is than have it left hanging over you without knowing what it is.
Yeah, but even so, it's better to find out that you haven't got that thing that's going to kill you.
That specific one, yeah. But like I say, the idea that it was just a dream, he'd have been all over that. I'm certain of it.
I'm a creative. This is what I do. This is.
Yeah, it would have been easy. It would have been an easy answer for him, and yet to this day, he is absolutely adamant that is not what it was. And under hypnosis, no, that's not what it was. Yeah, it's quite an interesting one. But yeah, so listeners, do go out and read Communion, watch the movie. It's available to download on Amazon and other places. So in summary, Neil, we've debated it back and forth. It boils down to a very simple question: do you believe that Whitley Strieber had an otherworldly experience?
I believe that he believes he had an otherworldly experience, but I also, because he has such form for imagining things so vividly that he actually thinks they've happened to him, and that he's actually made a very good living in his life. He's had a very good life out of writing these things down, weaving them into a work of fiction, which is then made into a Hollywood movie. He's an extremely wealthy and successful man. So, yeah, the fact that he's stuck on this one, that he's become obsessed, that he can't quite shake that maybe this really did happen. I believe that he believed it, but I wasn't convinced by the movie anyway that he'd been visited by creatures from another world.
Fair enough. Well, for me, because he was in the career, because he was already successfully writing stuff, I think if he was simply going to do that, that's the route he would have gone down. And as someone who had total form in terms of imagining things and then picturing them so vividly, he would have known what that was like. So for me, I agree with you. He believes that something happened to him, and I'm inclined to take him at his word that something really did. But there you go. What do you think, listeners? Do tweet us, send us a message on Facebook, comment below. Let us know what you think, and let us know as well if there are any specific subjects in ufology or the alien phenomenon that you would like us to discuss. Don't forget to join us next time when we will be discussing... Neil, I have to ask, would you describe yourself as a squeamish person?
No. I revel in horror.
Good to hear. That's very good to hear, but nevertheless you may want to put the burger down before our next discussion, because we will be going into the gruesome phenomenon that is cattle mutilations.
Cattle mutilations, right.
Yeah, so don't miss that one. So from me, Stu.
And from me, Neil.
Take care, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Bye-bye. Aliens Explored is a Feagle Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by hooksounds.com and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Facebook and Twitter or by visiting aliensexplored.com.